Thank you. All right, without further ado, Dan Hunt, who is our committee chair for our speaker lineup, has been doing an amazing job, has found Nick Erickson, who is our upcoming speaker today. And Dan, why don't you go ahead and introduce him?
Thank you, Margaret. Today is Tuesday, December 8th, 2020, and this is the weekly meeting, the Edina Morningside Rotary Club. Today's speaker is Nick Erickson. Nick is the Director of Research and Legislative Affairs for Housing First Minnesota, serving as Housing First Minnesota's point of contact for the housing industry's regulatory agencies and local government entities. He also leads the Housing Affordability Institute's research programs. Housing First Minnesota is the leading voice for builders and remodelers. They help their members build their businesses through marketing, advocacy, and industry connections. Their vision is to be as vital in government and politics as they are in the Minnesota economy. Nick holds a bachelor's degree in business and communications from the University of St. Thomas Opus College of Business and was a 2018-2019 policy fellow at the University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs. Nick is an avid triathlete and loves to swim, bike, and run in his free time. He lives in Eagan with his wife and two daughters who are 8 and 3 years old. Nick, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me, and thank you everyone for your time this morning. I'm just gonna make sure, am I gonna share my screen, or is this gonna have it?
If you can share your screen.
Yep, I'm gonna.
It's easier.
Yep, I'm gonna do that right now.
There you go.
Oh, screen sharing has been disabled, so I can.
Okay. Let's see here. All right, if I put you up, can you control at this point, Nick?
I'm not sure. Doesn't look like it, but I can tell you when to advance the slide. That's just fine. So.
Well, let's try this. Let's see. Well, I would really like it if you could control it. Otherwise, you know, in the interest of time, I suppose it's, I don't.
Let's just go, Mary, you run the screen. He'll tell you to advance the slides.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Very good.
All right. You can, why don't you head on to the next slide, that's fine. All right, well, thank you everyone. I've gotten to know Dan over the last year and a half talking about the housing issues going on in the state. And before I begin, just want to give you a little bit more background about Housing First Minnesota and kind of what's going on in the state's housing market before we move on. So Housing First Minnesota used to be known as the Builders Association of Minnesota, but you probably know us best through our consumer-facing brands. We actually run the nation's leading home tours, the Parade of Homes here in the Twin Cities, as well as the Remodeler Showcase, which happen twice a year. And of course, our Artisan Home Tour, which is in June of every year. And we were able to keep these going this year in a modified format, despite the pandemic, due to our resiliency of our members. Next slide, please. But we're more than that. We're actually a health insurance entity for our members. We run a newspaper. We run the state's largest energy efficient new construction program. As Dan said, I manage our Housing Affordability Institute, which is our research entity. And then the work I'm most proud of really is our homelessness initiative in our Housing for Heroes program, which is a partnership with Lennar, Minnesota, the state's largest home builder, as well as the Minnesota Assistance Council for Veterans. We are currently on our 5th home for homeless veterans. We're housing female veterans and their families, as well as male veterans. And it's really been something that has been a great project for us to be a part of. Next slide, please. So Minnesota has 3 concurrent housing problems going on in the state. And the first one is the state's inventory crisis. Minnesota consistently ranks as having the lowest housing inventory in the nation. And of course, this is really putting pressure on existing and rental markets. This lack of available homes of all types, apartments, condos, homes for ownership, is creating a demand crunch. And right now, the last time I checked, our median home price in Minnesota is $315,000. That's a 10% increase over 2 years and 40% increase over the past 5 years. And the state has an ambitious housing goal of adding 300,000 new units by 2030. We're making good progress on that, but we have to keep our foot on the pedal. Next slide, please. Equity crisis would be the second crisis we have in the state. The Twin Cities is home to the largest gap between white homeowners and those from the communities of color. As Minnesota becomes more diverse, this is going to make our housing problems grow. Of course, home ownership is important because it is the single largest wealth driver, wealth creator for many Americans. A lot of this problem does have to do with the Twin Cities former policies of racial segregation going on up until about the 1940s. There's also some exclusionary zoning policies that persist to this day. Next slide, please. And then, of course, there's the affordability crisis, which is connected to the other two. All these crises kind of feed off one another. The Twin Cities is home to the highest construction and development costs in the Midwest. We often talk at Housing First Minnesota with builders and looking to enter the market. And time again, they are astonished at how expensive it is to build new homes here. And a lot of that is tied to what we're going to be talking about in a few minutes, which is the Metropolitan Council's land use policy. So next slide, please. Just to give you a quick comparison, this is a slide one of our members put together a few months back, and something we shared at the legislature over the years. I update this as home price changes over the last 2 years since we've been using this. But this is a home built throughout the United States, predominantly in the upper Midwest, two to three bath home, 4 to 5 bedrooms, a 2 to 3 car garage. In the Twin Cities, this is going to cost you about $407,000. In Columbus, Ohio, significantly more affordable at about $315,000. And then in Indianapolis, I believe this option, this price is without a basement at $232,000. With a basement, it would be about $250,000. As you can see, vast price differences just across the upper Midwest. And there's about 36 reasons for that. And Met Council, our land rationing policies that they have is a contributing factor to this. Next slide, please. So to understand the kind of what's the dynamic in the Twin Cities land market, we have to talk about urban growth boundaries. And really that is a boundary which directs, enables, or restricts growth. And there's really two different types. There's geographic or natural, and then there's political or artificial, depending on what terms you prefer. Some markets have both, have one or two to a lesser or greater extent. Next slide, please. So here's some examples of some urban growth boundaries from across the United States. Chicago, of course, has Lake Michigan, which really directs its growth north, south, and west. Denver, the second one, upper right-hand corner here, very similar, has mountains, which is going to push its growth to the north, south, and east. Bottom right corner is Miami. Miami has the Atlantic Ocean, as well as it has the Everglades. And so you're going to have your growth in Miami being, more north-south, and really more north at this point as they've developed as much as they can. But the Twin Cities, we don't have lakes, or we have lakes, but we don't have a Great Lake. We don't have mountains. We don't have an ocean. What we do have, though, is the largest or most powerful urban growth boundary in the country. Next, please. And that is the Metropolitan Urban Services Line. It was established in 1976 and does serve as the official growth boundary of the Twin Cities. Essentially, it is the extent to which coordinated sewer and water services will reach a given area at a given point in time. As I said, it's the major political urban growth boundary in the United States. There's really only one other that's comparable, and that is in Portland. We'll show you what that looks like. Next slide, please. It is not necessarily a easy line to find here. You see it is really jagged and follows annexation of areas. There's different shades to this map, and that's because the line is updated really in conjunction with the comprehensive planning that go on at the local level. You hear a lot about maybe one for a couple of years every decade, and this shows the current growth boundary up to 2040. And really the areas that you see in the kind of the fuchsia and the darker purple here are going to be the areas that are going to be blessed for growing from the Met Council standpoint in the next 20 years. And then the darker oranges are also in the next 20 years. And those oranges would be who has a local independent sewer system separate from the Met Council. Next slide, please. Now, I want to say first, Housing First Minnesota, our members, we are not an anti-Met Council group. We actually share a goal with the Met Council, and that is orderly growth. However, our concerns with the Met Council and its application of their policies really are tied to the end result of this. Really, the whole point of the MUSA line is to stop leapfrog development from happening and to ensure an orderly growth plane here within the Twin Cities. Unfortunately, kind of how the methodology that they use to plan for land doesn't really achieve that result. In actuality, it achieves exactly the opposite of what it's intending to do, which is to push development outside of the growth plane. And there's several reasons for that. First is their land does not account for unwilling sellers. There are folks who will not sell for a variety of reasons, and that is something you can't track with their data. It does not account for the political realities of development, and I'll get into that in just a moment. It also does not allocate changes of market condition or regulations. A great example of that is they currently allot 2% of all land up for development for stormwater. It's actually 8%. So they're already under planning by several percentage points just with a change of regulations within the last 10 years. Next slide, please. The best example I can give you of this is Prince's Land in Chanhassen. This really checks all the boxes in terms of kind of what is going on with their methodology. Really since 1990 and through to the 2020 comp plan, Prince's Land in Chanhassen was listed as developable land. And of course, it wasn't until he passed away and his family was looking to sell the land that it actually was available on the land market, despite being listed as available for, or planned to be available for about 26 years. As I already said earlier, their methodology underplans for stormwater, which is something that affects it, but it also did not account for the political realities of development. And the reason this land parcel makes a great example is there's a lot of media coverage around the sale and development of this land. As I said, it's a 160-acre parcel, which would traditionally mean about 10% of land would be preserved for parks, so 16 acres. Another 10% for roads and other infrastructure, 16 acres. Stormwater, they anticipated 3.2 acres. So really, under their process, they would have 125 acres available for development. In reality, in order to get this development approved, the developer had to give to the city for free half the land for a park. And at the end of the day, the developer was left with closer to 55 acres of developable land, not the 125 the Met Council expected. Now, this is an extreme example, but as you can see, if you replicate this over time, it really affects how much land is available for development. Next slide, please. And this really kind of how the market responds to the Met Council line is we call the next step problem. And really what we see here is a traditional supply and demand dynamic. There's not much supply of land, so but a significant demand. So of course prices will rise. We also have sellers who know that my land is not, or my neighbors can't sell their land until 2040, but I can sell mine now. I might wait until 2030, 2035, and get a higher price in 15 years if I can. So we do see more sellers holding out because of the lack of competition in the immediate area. There's also some cities like Woodbury that have their own urban growth boundary in addition to what the Met Council has. And so once again, there we have this dynamic of people holding off land in the market until the price is even higher because they know they can, because the policies are encouraging them to do so. And it's important to note that at the end of the day, a developer is not paying for this land. A builder's not paying for this land. It's a homeowner that's paying for it. And as we look at our housing challenges in the state, we have to examine one of the larger contributing factors, which is the high cost of land in the Twin Cities. Next slide, please. So here's an example I put together with the help of several land developers 2 years ago. And this shows the per acre cost of land, both in and outside of the urban services line. Of course, in the reddish orange here, that's where sewer and water coordinated is available. In the blue, it's not because it's outside of the MUSA line, but you can see in the vast price differences. And some of these parcels of land are near adjacent. Some are separated by a county road, some are separated by one other farm, but essentially these are very, very similar plots of land that are comparable, put together by some land developers. And there's a vast difference, as you can see. Prior Lake, you're gonna get about 5 times more for your land in Prior Lake than you would in adjacent Credit River, about 12 times more in Blaine than in Ham Lake. And really it goes on throughout the metro like this. And in a perfect system, you wouldn't see the sharp price increase and decrease at a border of a line. If this line didn't exist, you would see a natural gradient with land really expensive in Minneapolis and St. Paul, getting more affordable as you go out into the market until you finally reach a place like Ham Lake or Credit River. You wouldn't see this stark difference between land prices. Next slide, please. So kind of the 2 biggest questions we get asked on this a lot, and I discuss with elected officials, is how do we approach this topic? And I'll tell you, this is probably one of the best places to talk about it because Edina has Representative Steve Elkins at the legislature, and he is one of the folks at the Capitol who understands this better than I do. And he has made this kind of a topic of a recent conversation on a Met Council oversight hearing, along with another representative, Jerry Hertas of Corcoran, who is a developer by trade. And we've been working on raising visibility to this topic because it is a complex topic, and it is one that I think needs to be addressed as we're looking at fixing housing. And the way Housing First Minnesota thinks we should address it is twofold. One, when the Met Council plans for sewer and water and transit systems, they don't plan for what they expect to happen. They anticipate surges in demand. If you're planning a sewer system by the University of Minnesota, for example, or a transit system, they're not going to plan that system capacity for a Tuesday in July where nothing's going on. The transit system, the sewer system, the water system will be built around game day at TCF Bank Stadium, maybe something going on at the barn and Mariucci at the same time. Lots of students on campus, fans on campus, creating higher demand for its services. We don't have that in the land system. We have a guess made 10 years out, and they're hoping that they get it right. And as I said earlier, it's not able to respond to changes in market demand, market conditions. So we think that there should be, just like with sewer, water, transit systems, a way to have some more flexibility built into the system to handle changes in demand. Also, the MUSA line is tied immensely to infrastructure. So the question we have is, what would an alternative financing structure for sewer, water, and the like look like. And I think looking around the country, there's a lot of ideas. One of these is community improvement districts, which allow developers to pool together and build infrastructure, sewer, water, roads in an area that would otherwise not be serviced for quite some time. And so there's many different ways to approach it. I think those two seem to be a great way to do it right now. But the biggest question really is how will the market respond? And, you know, as I said earlier, we have a really sharp divide between what land costs are between a city like Lake Elmo and then Grant, Minnesota, Grant Township, Afton, and Woodbury. So what would that look like? And I think it would go back to that natural gradient where land would gradually get more affordable as you move away from Minneapolis and St. Paul proper. You would see land prices fall within the metropolitan urban services area, and you would see land prices rise in that first community that is currently outside, and that's a good thing. It would create this equilibrium, which really is seen, with the exception of Minneapolis and Portland, in pretty much any housing market without significant geographic boundaries in the country. And I think it is something that would be long overdue. We anticipate this would be tens of thousands of dollars to the cost of a home. And it is probably, you know, there are three factors that go into why a lot costs the way it does. You know, the first is what you pay for the land, and that's what we're talking about today. But there are other factors that go into this, which is the cost of improvements and also the density a developer is able to achieve. So addressing this is not the end all be all of housing. If there was one silver bullet to fix the housing market, it would have been found decades ago. We just have to kind of pick away at each one of these topics. And I think this is definitely one of 36 things that the housing groups, the legislature, will be looking at action on in the next couple of years. So I know we are, I think, is that my next, I think I have one slide left. There we go. So if you want to learn more about kind of what I've been talking about and what we have going on at Housing First Minnesota, our website is housingfirstmn.org. Our advocacy does have some other information at letsfixhousing.org. That's kind of more of our advocacy, public affairs focused website. And then our research on this and other topics are found at housingaffordablity institute.org.
Nick, thank you. I've got a few questions here from people who emailed me or in the chat. But let me start with going back. You have to go back in the slides, but you showed the difference in the cost of houses between here, Columbus, Ohio, and Indianapolis, Indiana. How much of those differences relate to the cost of land in our market?
I would say a lot of those do. I haven't done a point-by-point analysis of building codes and environmental regulations outside of land in those, but you know what we find is the majority of the cost difference between Minnesota and other markets really does come down to land costs. Some of that is raw land, as I said. That's really what we're talking about with just the Met Council. But there are other, you know, local land use policies that that are at play here. Interestingly, I showed a home with a two-car garage earlier. There are some cities where a two-car garage is illegal. You couldn't actually build a home with a two-car garage. There are other cities where you know, you have a mandate on what the home can look like, and you can get up to $20,000 in cost difference between even St. Cloud and Maple Grove because of how the home has to look on the exterior to be allowed to be built in there. And so there's a lot of, you know, local policies that are outside of land that can affect the prices as well.
The purpose of the MUSA line is to ensure orderly growth, and that's, you know, that's all the other infrastructure that goes along with it, especially transportation. So everything's a trade-off. But if the MUSA line was relaxed, so we didn't have all these aberrations in pricing, what impact does that have on these other costs that taxpayers have to foot?
I think it depends on what services and where the development happens. And a lot of these places, if that we're looking to maybe relax and change the dynamic, it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. The sewer and water services aren't there right now because they're not allowed to be there. And I think that's really the question that we have to ask is why aren't these services there? And really it's because the lack of the line. From a taxing standpoint, I'm not sure what all would change. I don't know if you're looking for a specific.
Well, let's just talk about transportation. Mm-hmm. The more spread out we are, the more road capacity we need. Now, that may be a better solution. I'm not saying one way or another, but certainly an environment where there's more single-family homes built farther and farther out requires more and more roads, and that concerns some people, mm-hmm. right? And I'm sure you run into that all the time when you're advocating expanding the MUSA line.
Yeah, it's important that the folks that are paying for those new roads are the new residents. Residential development is one of the largest funders of transportation infrastructure in the state. The hundreds of miles that our members build in their developments or in cities annually it's immense. So the cost of the new roads are borne by those new residents. It's baked into the land price. As I said, you have a three-part formula for land, and one of that is the cost of improvements. A lot of that is the cost of roads. Now, of course, there's the cost of maintaining those. That is borne by, depending on the type of the road, property taxes, whether it's a county road, a city road. Of course, there's also state highways, and that's not a property tax funded. That's general fund for the revenue, general state revenue funded.
So I don't want to belabor the point. It's wondering that some roads are paid for outside of the development by all of us, whether it's expansions of state highways or the interstate. A question here about and you touched on it, the impact of a tight MUSA line on housing prices and rents in the closer in communities. And so what happens to housing prices in cities like Edina and in downtown Minneapolis when the MUSA line is, in your words, too tight?
Yeah, really it's not going to affect a new home price in an area where there's being redeveloped land. And what you're going to see is you're going to see the impact on a regional basis on the existing home market due to the lack of supply. As we're restricting the land, we're limiting how much that can be built. And that is for condos, for apartments, senior living, single family homes. That is being restricted to the point where we are adding more residents annually than we're adding housing. So we're not keeping pace. And that is going to create this immense crunch on rents and existing home prices. So, we do have skyrocketing rents, skyrocketing existing home prices, and that is due to the lack of supply overall in our market. We simply have the worst supply of any housing market in the country, and that's from the census data. Where we see that dynamic playing out is across the entire market, because we're not adding the new homes. The prices for existing homes all across the region, whether you're in Minneapolis, St. Paul, or you're in Waconia, you're going to see your prices go up because we simply don't have the supply. Now, that's great news if you're selling. If you're selling right now, you can make a lot of money in your home. But the challenge is for folks younger than me and trying to get into home ownership for the first time, or even just renting. They are paying a far greater portion of their income for housing than previous generations.
Another way of dealing with the supply problem of land is to allow higher densities. Can you speak for a little bit about how your members deal with that, the kind of pushback they get from cities when they want to do more dense developments.
Yeah, so density is an interesting topic. So, as it relates to the Met Council, there's densities that cities are saying exist for the purposes of their comp plan, but they're and oftentimes the zoning ordinances at the local level don't mirror what they show on this map for the Met Council MUSA projection. So it gets really interesting in terms of the dynamic of density. And as we have high land development costs in the Twin Cities, we have some of the highest in the country. We have high raw land costs, are some of the highest outside of a coastal region. Really, density is the one way to lower the cost of land in the Twin Cities. And that's for residential, as well, or for single family residential, but also for multifamily. And increased density will lower housing prices, and that's something that I think is it's a debate that goes on in the background. It has not really bubbled up to the forefront. It would have at the Capitol. We were going to have a discussion on this topic earlier this year. The Monday that they ended up shutting down for COVID. So this was a discussion that's been a long time coming. Higher density would have a significant effect on lowering land prices. But as a person who goes to planning commission meetings and city council meetings, if you talk about increased density, that's where you have folks that are opposed to new housing really come out. And then it gets to a political trade-off of, does a local government support its voters, or do they support what's needed in the housing market?
One final question, then we'll let you go. You painted a picture with some problems. What would you like the Met Council to do with the MUSA line?
Yeah, we would think expanding its capacity to, one, I think from a methodology standpoint, take a look at the current state of some of the concessions that are made. So or land given away for other purposes. As I said, for stormwater, they plan for 2% when 8% is required. So they're off by a factor of 4. I think having a forward-looking methodology where they recognize what is going to be needed in the future, but not what's needed in the past, is step one. Also, opening it up. We say maybe open up to twice as much land for what's currently available, as well as enable some alternative financing methods to be used to bring infrastructure to where growth is happening. Because right now, growth really can only happen where they say it can, and that's really what gets difficult. Is we can't meet the demand right now because there's not enough land available, especially at the price point. Really what's missing in our market is that starter home, that entry-level home that built communities across the state. And we're one of the few housing markets where a modest entry-level home is not being built today. And opening up the land market would allow those homes to be built again and ensure that all Minnesotans can afford a place to call home.
Nick, appreciate your time this morning. It was a great presentation. The members appreciate it. And thank you again.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.